other words, what we're led to here is a profound dilemma. The dilemma is very simple. You can say it in 2 lines. Growth is unsustainable, at least in the form that we have it at the moment. Degrowth, which it turns out is the rather clunky opposite of growth, or if you prefer the slightly more savoury French décroissance, certainly feels like something that you might want to indulge in, certainly if you missed your lunch on a Monday afternoon. Décroissance is, though, unstable. We do not have a mechanism for achieving stability in a degrowing economy. And as John Maynard Keynes pointed out, one of the key functions of the economy is to maintain stability. So that's a very, very profound dilemma. And the outcome of that is essentially that we find ourselves kind of locked into an iron cage, as I've rather dramatically called it in the book, borrowing on Weber and others, to 2 mutually reinforcing dynamics. One of them is economic structure, this structure that demands consumption growth, and the other is a social logic. And as I said, the 2 things fit together neatly to provide a very good basis for continuing growth and a very bad basis, as it turns out, for either well-being, which is not well served by these dynamics, or indeed for the environment. And another interesting point here is that government itself, and I think this is quite an important point, government itself finds itself conflicted here. Why? Clearly government has a role to maintain social stability. If it has a role to maintain social stability, and social stability depends on economic stability, then it has a role to maintain economic stability. But if economic stability depends on growth, then government certainly is legitimate in perceiving its aim to be to maintain economic growth. So we have a government who on one hand is, and we can see the evidence of this over decades, tied to the development of an economy based on growth, even as that same economy and that same objective comes into conflict with other ecological and social goals. Now this is a point in time where I think I can safely say that I've attempted at least to answer the question, do we have an economics fit for purpose, with a resounding no. And of course we have at this point a couple of responses. One of them, and I admit to being tempted towards it from time to time, is to look for a small holding on a hillside above the rising sea level and to bed down there for the rest of our comfortable lives with a few chickens and some goats and enough productive soil to at least support an immediate family. It's a very, very tempting dream, and surprisingly common actually amongst those who have been working in this area for decades and find themselves confronted with what is a sort of impossibility theorem, or a set of impossibility theorems. And I have a lot of sympathy for that, as I say, but it does seem to me, and impossibility theorems became a kind of theme during the writing of Prosperity Without Growth, because they confronted one at every turn in relation to economic structure, in relation to people's behaviour, in relation to the role of government. Everywhere there seemed to be a sense that we couldn't do things otherwise. And yet, I think that there are 2 very good reasons to reject that position, to reject that idea that there's nothing to do. One of them is purely pragmatic. It is simply that to accept no possibilities for alternatives at this point is defeatist and pessimist in its worst sense, and will lead inevitably towards outcomes which I think will be abhorrent. And the other is that actually it isn't true. Almost all of those impossibility theorems turn out not to be true. Economies don't have to be organised that way. People are more than consumers. Governments don't have to be locked into a conflicting position. And a lot of what Prosperity Without Growth does is at least point to some of those possibilities. Of course, it doesn't solve all those dynamics. Of course, there are still difficult questions there. But what it does say very clearly is our responsibility at this point in time is to search for those possibilities. And actually that message was iterated just in time for the inside cover of the Earthscan book by President Sarkozy a couple of weeks ago when he was launching the Commission report on the measurement of social progress. And he said to us then, the crisis doesn't only make us free to imagine other models, another future, another world, it obliges us to do so. And somebody at Earthscan, who shall remain nameless, pointed out to me, looking at those words about imagining other models, and said, isn't Carla Bruni enough for him? To which I, of course, replied, perhaps she's too much. We could conceivably stay within our planetary boundaries. And what we have there is the germs of an idea, the basis for an economics for a finite planet. It doesn't work the way the old one did, but there are avenues there for exploration. And that's the essence of prosperity without growth. Fixing the economy, of course, is only part of the problem. We also have to address the slightly inconvenient social logic of consumerism, and that's far from simple, obviously. It is deeply embedded in us. But the arguments that we have made there is largely that consumerism does a disservice to what it means to be human. And change there actually is something that will lead to better lives. In evidence of that, there are lots of people who are already trying to do it. There's a kind of latent discontent, actually, with consumerism and with rising material consumption in particular. There's concerns over the social recession. There's lots of grassroots initiatives now, really exciting stuff, which are people saying it is time to live our lives differently. We want a different kind of prosperity. We want alternative hedonism, sources of identity, creativity and meaning that are outside of the market realm, but allow us to flourish in ways that are more truly human. Again, there's a very important lesson there for investment. In particular, one of the things that's very resonant with other people's work at this point in time is the importance of public spaces and social goods. Michael Sandel, in his Wreath lectures, spoke about public spaces as sites for the cultivation of a common citizenship, so that people from different walks of life encounter one another and so acquire enough of a sense of a shared life that we can meaningfully think of one another as citizens in a common venture. And I would venture to suggest that actually that sense of common citizenship, of a common venture, is one of the casualties of the over-consumerist society that we've allowed, in a sense, to become our mainstay for a stable economy. Once again, investment is crucial there in creating the capabilities for people to flourish in less materialistic ways. And at the end of the day, I'm coming right back round really to my distinction, that's what prosperity tells us. Prosperity isn't just about material pleasures. It goes beyond material concerns. It resides in all sorts of places, in the health and happiness of our families, in the strength of our relationships, our trust in our community. It's evidenced by our satisfaction at work and our sense of shared meaning and purpose, and it hangs on our potential to participate meaningfully in the life of society. Prosperity consists in our ability to flourish as human beings within the ecological limits of the planet. And the challenge for our society, it's only a small one after all, is to create the conditions under which this is possible. It's the most urgent task of our times. Thank you very much.